The Christmas story is a story of the birth of just one child, but it's also the story of so many things being born in so many places. It's the story of hope being born to unlikely people and creating moments in their lives that they'd never forget. The story of promise and potential being born in the middle of isolated places where people feel so alone. The story of power being reborn and redefined in the capitals of the world. And the story of hope and light and salvation being born to us in the middle of places that are the most personal and intimate parts of our souls.
Well, hey Evergreen, welcome to part one of our Christmas series called Christmas on Location, where we're going to be talking about the different locations that are a part of the Christmas story. And today's message is called Christmas in the Mountains. Now, in Minnesota, mountains are not something we know an awful lot about. I mean, we're standing here today at Taylor's Falls, and truthfully, for Minnesota, I mean, what's behind me here is a pretty big height for us. And I'm kind of nervous just even standing right here and getting a little bit sick to my stomach. But the truth is that for Minnesota, this is kind of a big height for us. We don't really have mountains. We've got like Wild Mountain and Spirit Mountain, which just truthfully are more like little hills that want to be mountains when they grow up. Minnesota is a land of lakes and swamps and woods and shorelines and cornfields. We don't know an awful lot about mountains, but the truth is that a mountain is something that's unmistakable when you run into it. You know it when you've seen one, and you never forget it if you've been on top of one. Last summer, my family and I took a road trip to the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And while we were there, we got in our truck and we drove up a road called Trail Ridge Road that took us up 12,000 feet into the heart of the mountains. It was one of those rides you don't really forget as a kid, you know. The time that Dad risked our lives for the family adventure. Just these tiny, narrow roads that kept going up and up and up, and the turns got sharper and sharper as we climbed. There were no guardrails at all, just these sheer drops to the bottom. And maybe there's some of you in the world that love that kind of thing, but I'm not one of them. I had to keep my eyes directly on the road because if I would have looked down while I was driving, I would have passed out in my seat. But then when we got to the top, it was unbelievable. Everything looked different being 12,000 feet above it. The vegetation is different, the air is different. It's like somehow you could stare at the view below you and make more sense of the things that you're looking down on. When I was up on the top of the mountain, 12,000 feet looking down, it was an incredible sight up there, one I'll never forget. You know, the Christmas story is the story of people who, in this short span of time, experienced incredible mountaintop moments. From a 16-year-old girl who's told that she's giving birth to the Messiah, to shepherds who were visited by angels, to wise men who followed a supernatural sign to see the King of Kings, Jesus' birth brought about extraordinary moments in the lives of those that followed him, mountaintop moments in their lives. You know, I think that when they were up there, that life made more sense to them. I think that in their mountaintop moments, they were able to look back on their lives and where they'd been and ahead to where they were going, and they were able to see how the pieces of their lives would come together a little bit better. I bet that Christmas was a mountaintop experience for them like nothing they've ever experienced in their lives, the kind of thing that only happens a few times in a lifetime if you're lucky enough. You know what I think? I think that even here in Minnesota, even in the middle of the flatlands when life is just kind of lived at one level most of the time, I still think that God's desire for his people is that they have mountaintop experiences with him. So as we launch out onto Christmas on Location this week, that's what I want to talk with you a little bit about, is mountaintop moments with God. I want to look at a few of them from the Christmas story and talk about how Christmas can be lived for all of us from the mountaintop this year.